A death in the shadows, the evidence that changes everything for Britt. In the hallowed halls of Port Charles General Hospital, secrets have a way of surfacing when least expected, especially when they arrive in a sealed envelope bearing the name of a dead man. The events that unfolded over the past 48 hours have shaken the foundation of everything Britt Westburn thought she knew about survival, loyalty, and the true cost of ambition. What began as a routine confrontation at Windermere Mansion has evolved into a nightmare that threatens to consume her entire world. For Britt, the real horror wasn't the gunshot that echoed through the halls at Windermere. It was the package that arrived the next morning, containing evidence that Professor Henry Dalton had gathered against the one man both of them feared most, Jen Sidwell. The moment everything changed. The night of November 19th will forever be seared into Britt's memory. She had gone to Windermere to confront Dalton about his recklessness, his careless behavior that threatened to expose everything they had worked toward. The research project was delicate, intricate, and absolutely dependent on secrecy. Dalton's recent actions, his drunken rambling about secret labs, his involvement in framing teenager Rocco Falconeri with false evidence had pushed Sidwell past his breaking point. "You've become a liability," Britt had told him, her voice sharp as a scalpel. "You lied to the police. You trashed the lab to frame a child. You've put our entire operation at risk." She wasn't wrong. Dalton's choices had become increasingly erratic, increasingly dangerous. The young professor, brilliant though he was, had proven himself unable to handle the pressures of their work under Sidwell's thumb. Britt expected Sidwell to terminate his employment, to send him away with warnings and threats. She never expected him to pull a gun. "This is what happens to people who betray me," Sidwell had said calmly, his voice devoid of emotion as he raised the weapon. The shot came without hesitation, without warning. Dalton's body crumpled to the floor, and in that terrible instant, everything changed. Britt had stood frozen, unable to move, unable to think. All she could focus on was Sidwell's face, not angry, not disturbed, simply resolved. To him, Dalton was a problem that required elimination. The package. What Britt didn't know was that Dalton had anticipated the danger. In the days before his death, the professor had taken a calculated risk. He had gathered evidence against Sidwell, documentation, records, proof of the organization's illegal research activities. More than that, he had compiled information about the coercive tactics used to keep Britt tethered to Sidwell's operation, evidence of medical blackmail and manipulation. 2 days after watching Dalton die, Britt received a package at her apartment. There was no return address, no note explaining its origin, but she knew immediately who had sent it. Inside were files, photographs, encrypted documents, and most shockingly, a handwritten letter in Dalton's familiar scrawl. "Britt," the letter read, "if you're reading this, then I'm probably dead. Sidwell has decided I'm expendable. I don't blame him. I've become unstable, unpredictable. But before the end, I wanted you to know the truth. You've been manipulated just as much as I have. These documents prove it. They prove everything he's done to control you, everything he's hidden. You deserve to know who you're really working for." The words struck her like a physical blow. Britt's hands trembled as she examined the contents of the package. There were medical records detailing the medications Sidwell had been providing her, not to help her Huntington's disease, as she'd been told, but to keep her dependent, compliant, and terrified of losing access to it. There were communications between Sidwell and Pascal, the man who had held her captive in Croatia, discussing her as though she were an asset to be managed rather than a person. But that wasn't all. The package contained something far more explosive. Evidence of Sidwell's entire operation. Names, dates, locations of secret laboratories. Records of illegal experimentation. Documentation of the research that had been conducted under the guise of medical advancement, but was, in truth, something far more sinister. The impossible choice. Now Britt faced an impossible choice. The evidence was damning, more than enough to bring down Sidwell, to expose his organization, to see justice served for Dalton and for herself. All she had to do was walk into Port Charles Police Department and hand it over to Commissioner Dante Falconeri. But the thought terrified her. Sidwell had already demonstrated what he was willing to do to eliminate threats. She had watched him shoot Dalton without hesitation. She knew from personal experience that Sidwell's reach extended far beyond Windermere, far beyond Port Charles. He had connections to people who could make problems disappear. He had proven he could manipulate events, erase evidence, and silence witnesses. If she went to the police with this information, Sidwell would know immediately. The question wasn't whether he would find out, it was how quickly he could execute his revenge. Britt sat in her dimly lit apartment, the package of evidence spread across her table, and felt the weight of impossible circumstances pressing down on her chest. She thought about Rocco, the innocent teenager whose life had been nearly destroyed by Dalton's fabricated charges. She thought about her mother, Liesel, who had nearly died in her arms. She thought about Emma, the young woman who had been trying to expose animal testing in the lab and had nearly been killed for her efforts. She thought about what Sidwell would do to all of them if she betrayed him. The burden of knowledge. The next morning, when Jason Morgan arrived at the apartment above Bobby's diner where Britt had been staying, he found her visibly shaken. Her eyes were red from crying, and there was a tremor in her hands that she couldn't quite hide. "What's wrong?" Jason asked, concern etched into his features. "What happened?" Britt looked at him, really looked at him, and saw in his face the genuine desire to help her. Jason had always been someone she could trust, someone willing to face danger to protect the people he cared about. But could she ask him to do that now? Could she put him in Sidwell's crosshairs? "I can't tell you," she whispered. "I want to. God knows I want to. But if I do, if I tell you what I know, you'll be in danger. Sidwell doesn't forgive. He doesn't hesitate." "Britt," Jason began, but she cut him off. "Promise me something," she said, her voice barely steady. "Promise me you won't push this." "Not until I figure out what I'm going to do." Jason wanted to argue. She could see it written all over his face. But he also understood, in that moment, that Britt was trapped in a prison of fear and moral complexity that no amount of argument could penetrate. She was alone with Dalton's evidence, alone with the knowledge of Sidwell's crimes, and utterly paralyzed by the fear of what would happen if she took the next step. The silent scream. In the days that followed, Britt did something she had never done before. She kept the evidence hidden. She didn't go to the police. She didn't confide in Jason or Liesel or anyone else who might convince her to act. Instead, she held the secret close, like a bomb with a timer she couldn't control. She watched as Dalton's death was investigated. She watched as Laura Collins, the newly re-elected mayor, became a person of interest after his body was discovered in her car trunk. She watched as the pieces of Dalton's life were examined, analyzed, and filed away by the authorities. And all the while, she carried the knowledge that she could end it all. She could bring Sidwell down. She could expose his operation and see justice served. But the cost was too high. The risk was too great. Sidwell was a man who played for keeps. He had proven that beyond any shadow of a doubt. Britt Westburn had become a prisoner, not of bars or chains, but of her own fear and the terrible choice that Dalton had left her with. She held the keys to his kingdom, but she was terrified of what would happen if she dared to use them. The evidence sat in her apartment, waiting, and Britt waited too, suspended in a state of anxiety that threatened to consume her, torn between justice and survival in a game where Sidwell had already proven he would kill without hesitation. Next, we will learn about the explosive family drama unfolding between Trina Robinson, Jordan Ashford, and Curtis Ashford. The tension is reaching a boiling point as secrets, betrayals, and desperate attempts to protect loved ones collide in Port Charles. Trina has made a bold declaration. She will do everything in her power to keep her father, Curtis, from returning to Jordan, even if it means stepping into the middle of a decades-old love triangle. But as the layers of deception peel away, it becomes clear that Trina's plan may not be enough to stop the inevitable, and the fallout could shatter her family forever. Trina's defiant stand against Jordan. Trina Robinson has never been one to shy away from confrontation, but her latest move against Jordan Ashford is her most audacious yet. In a tense, emotionally charged conversation, Trina made it crystal clear that she would not allow her father, Curtis, to fall back into Jordan's orbit. She accused Jordan of being the reason her parents' marriage crumbled, painting her as the villain who tore apart a once loving family. Trina's words were sharp, her resolve unshakable, and she left no room for doubt Jordan would not be welcomed back into Curtis's life. But what Trina doesn't fully grasp is that her father's feelings for Jordan run deeper than mere nostalgia. They're rooted in years of unresolved history and a connection that has never truly faded. Curtis Ashford, meanwhile, is already mentally walking down the aisle with Jordan again. He's convinced that the unfinished business between them is finally ready to be resolved, and he's willing to risk everything, including his relationship with Trina, to see if their love can be rekindled. The question is, can Trina's fierce determination truly stand in the way of her father's heart, or is she fighting a losing battle against forces far stronger than her own willpower? The dark shadow over Portia's past. While Trina is laser-focused on keeping Jordan out of her father's life, she's also grappling with a much darker secret that threatens to tear her family apart from the inside. Trina has begun to suspect that her mother, Portia, may have been involved in a far more sinister act than anyone could have imagined: the attempted murder of a sitting congressman. This accusation is not just a wild theory, it's a bombshell that could destroy Portia's reputation, her career, and any chance of reconciliation with Curtis. Trina is torn between her loyalty to her mother and her desperate desire to protect her family from further scandal. But here's the twist: Portia's web of lies runs deeper than Trina realizes. Curtis has already lost trust in Portia, and their marriage was doomed long before Jordan re-entered the picture. Portia's deception isn't limited to her past actions. She's currently entangled in a secret affair with another man, and there's even speculation that she might be pregnant with his child. Drew, her former lover, is the least of her concerns now, as she navigates this dangerous new chapter in her life. Trina's efforts to bring her parents back together are built on a foundation of sand, and the truth is that Curtis and Portia have already moved on emotionally, if not legally. Kai's reluctance and Trina's dangerous gamble. Trina's plan to reunite her parents hinges on a risky move. She wants to come clean about her presence at the crime scene on the night of Drew's shooting. She believes that by revealing this secret, she can force her parents to confront their issues and ultimately find their way back to each other. But Kai, her confidant and ally, is deeply skeptical of this approach. When Trina shared her intentions with Kai, his face fell, and he immediately voiced his concerns. He knows that exposing this truth could send shockwaves through the family, potentially destroying any remaining trust between Curtis and Portia. Kai tries to reason with Trina, urging her to take a step back and consider the consequences of her actions. He warns her that the real problem isn't Drew's shooting, it's the fundamental lack of trust between her parents. Curtis and Portia have already moved past the drama surrounding Drew, and Trina's attempt to use this secret as a bargaining chip might backfire spectacularly. If Trina doesn't heed Kai's advice, she could end up spilling the beans to someone else, further complicating an already tangled web of secrets. Jordan's role in the family's fate. As Trina reels from her discovery of Jordan's connection to her parents' past, she begins to see Jordan as the ultimate obstacle to her family's happiness. She's convinced that Jordan's presence is what drove her parents apart, and she's not open to hearing any other version of the story. This single-minded focus leads Trina to consider drastic measures. Could she convince Jordan to stay away from Curtis by revealing her own sticky situation? Trina wonders if Jordan would be willing to keep this secret from Curtis, even if it meant protecting Trina's family. But there's a dangerous irony here. By asking Jordan to keep yet another secret, Trina risks destroying Curtis's trust in Jordan all over again. Jordan, for her part, is caught in the middle of this family drama. She's aware of the history between Curtis and Portia, but she's also grappling with her own feelings for Curtis. If Trina approaches her with the truth, Jordan will have to make a difficult choice: protect Trina's family by staying away from Curtis, or risk losing Curtis's trust by keeping another secret. The stakes are high, and the outcome could have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. The unraveling of trust and the future of the Ashford family. At the heart of this drama is the fragile thread of trust that binds the Ashford family together. Trina's attempts to protect her family are noble, but they're built on a foundation of secrets and half-truths. Curtis and Portia's marriage was already on shaky ground, and the arrival of Jordan has only exacerbated the existing cracks. Trina's plan to bring her parents back together by exposing the truth about Drew's shooting is a desperate gamble, and it's unclear whether it will succeed or only deepen the rift between them. As the story unfolds, it becomes clear that the Ashford family's future is hanging by a thread. Trina's determination to keep Jordan out of her father's life is admirable, but it may not be enough to stop the inevitable. Curtis's feelings for Jordan are too strong to be easily dismissed, and Portia's web of lies is too tangled to be untangled by Trina's efforts alone. The fallout from this family drama could be catastrophic, and the characters involved will have to confront the consequences of their actions head-on. The ripple effect of secrets and lies. The ripple effect of secrets and lies is a recurring theme in this storyline, and it's clear that no one is immune to their consequences. Trina's attempt to protect her family by keeping secrets only serves to deepen the mistrust between her parents. Curtis's inability to trust Portia is rooted in years of deception, and Jordan's presence only complicates matters further. As the characters grapple with their own secrets and lies, they're forced to confront the reality that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only way to move forward. The Ashford family story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of keeping secrets and the importance of honesty in relationships. Trina's efforts to bring her parents back together are noble, but they're ultimately doomed to fail unless the family can confront the truth and rebuild their trust from the ground up. Next, we will delve into the pressing need for revitalized storylines for three of the show's female characters who currently lack compelling arcs. These women have immense potential, yet their narratives have become stagnant, relegated to the sidelines or supporting roles rather than forefront drama. Let's explore what could be done to provide Elizabeth, Trina, and Christina with the substantial material they deserve, expanding on their backgrounds, current situations, and potential future developments in great detail. Elizabeth Baldwin is one such character who has been unfairly underused in recent storylines. Once a dynamic figure capable of intense personal drama, she now mostly serves as a sounding board for others, like Britt Westburn or Lucas Jones, offering advice but rarely driving the plot herself. This passive role restricts Rebecca Erbst's opportunity to showcase her talent in more complex dramatic realms. Elizabeth's identity in the hospital setting is primarily tied to her professional role, but her off hours remain largely unexplored. There lies a golden opportunity for the writers to overhaul her narrative background. They could introduce a controversial romance that challenges her moral code or entangle her in a medical ethics dilemma that tests her limits professionally and personally. Adding a deeper, more emotionally complex story would allow fans to see layers of vulnerability and strength that remain untapped. Elizabeth could also have an arc that intersects more meaningfully with other characters beyond sporadic interactions, perhaps involving a hidden family secret or a past trauma that resurfaces, complicating her present life. Such developments would transform her from a mere advisor into a leading figure whose choices propel vital storylines forward. Turning to Trina Robinson, her current storyline demonstrates some potential, but ultimately lacks the intensity she deserves. Although her involvement in the Drew Kane mystery story, alongside Kai Taylor, adds a suspenseful edge, the show fails to capitalize on this intrigue fully. Instead, much of Trina's screen time is consumed with her fixation on her parents' marriage, attempting to mediate between Portia and Curtis Ashford and opposing Jordan Ashford's influence. While familial loyalty is admirable, the repeated portrayal of Trina as a meddlesome daughter sidelines her independence and maturity. At 18 or 19 years old, Trina is on the cusp of adulthood and should be exploring her own ambitions, possibly pursuing further education, a budding career, or romantic possibilities that allow her to grow as a character in her own right. A stronger, more personal storyline could explore the consequences of the secret she shares with Kai, revealing how it affects her trust in others and self-identity. Moreover, her apparent parental fixation could be revisited if it becomes a catalyst for her rebellion or self-discovery, showing not just her protective instincts, but also her struggle to break free and define her own path beyond family drama. Finally, Christina Corinthos Davis is at a crossroads following the resolution of her tense involvement in the Rick Lansing kidnapping saga. Once a fiery and complex character deeply intertwined with gripping plots and romance, Christina currently finds herself in a lull. The departure of Allison Alley Rogers, her last romantic interest, leaves an emotional void and a lack of narrative momentum, coupled with the setback from the fire at Charlie's pub, which affects her career trajectory. Christina faces a natural juncture for reinvention. The next chapter in her life could provide a fresh canvas to develop not just new relationships, but also ambitions and challenges. Perhaps she embarks on a new career path within or beyond Port Charles, maybe in investigative journalism or advocacy work, leveraging the resilience she's shown before. This shift could also introduce new allies and rivals, creating fresh conflict and alliances. Romantically, introducing a charismatic new character or rekindling an old flame could re-energize her storyline, intertwining personal growth with dramatic tension. Essentially, Christina's reinvention needs to reflect her strength and vulnerability, illuminating her as a multidimensional character ready for new challenges and opportunities. General Hospital watchers eagerly anticipate more surprises and dramatic upheavals in Port Charles, and there is hope that these three women will soon be at the heart of captivating, juicy storylines. Elizabeth, Trina, and Christina each possess unique qualities and histories that could be the foundation for richer narratives, reinvigorating both the characters and the show overall. Their return to the forefront with fresh challenges, heartfelt romances, or bold new ambitions would not only please fans, but also enhance the series' dynamic storytelling. Stay tuned for ongoing updates as new developments unfold for these beloved characters, promising a thrilling future in General Hospital.